Hello. On behalf of the Center for Innovation and Global Health, and in collaboration with the Woods Institute of the Environment, I'm thrilled to present this Earth Day event, focused on some of the most pressing issues of our time. I'm Michelle Berry, the Senior Associate Dean for Global Health and the Director of the Center for Innovation and Global Health. As part of the Accelerating Climate Solutions series, we're showcasing an exciting new field today, human and planetary health. This bridges medicine, global health, and the environment and expands our conception of what a comprehensive environmental public health solution can really mean. So what exactly is human and planetary health? Human and planetary health recognizes the profound anthropogenic impacts on the planet that risk permanently destabilizing the linkages between health and the environment and our own health. It asserts that we can't be healthy on a degraded planet and that accelerating environmental changes poses a risk of extinction, not only of our species, but many others. Human and planetary health has long been a pressing concern to me. My expertise is in global health, and I've spent my career researching and treating tropical diseases in fragile ecosystems, often perturbed by conflict and wars, but clearly also by environmental degradation. I've seen time and time again how the delicate systems that we all depend upon to survive affect the most vulnerable and the poorest. Our impact on the earth, climate, and the ecological systems we all depend upon are the single greatest threat to human health that we face today. For this reason, human and planetary health has now become a strategic focus for the Center for Innovation and Global Health. And we join hands with the Woods Institute in this area. At Stanford Medicine, we are putting many resources into addressing these issues, many of which, as I alluded to, we are collaborating with the Woods Institute, whether it is catalyzing the first ever Human and Planetary Health inaugural postdoctoral fellowship, or the Action Lab for Human and Planetary Health called ALPHA. This is a very unique lab which leads a really strong communications campaign to translate planetary health research into action, into policy, into the hands of the influencers. There are many other exciting initiatives that are supporting important work and research around the campus, many of which you'll hear about today, and all of which are action-oriented, because if there's one thing we all understand about this field, is that it demands immediate and urgent action. So in ending, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers today to showcase the breadth of the work we're doing here at Stanford on this topic. I'm very excited for you to meet them all. And in ending, I wish you an incredibly happy Earth Day, and thank you for joining us today.
Happy Earth Day. Pleasure to add my welcome and thanks for joining today's webinar on human and planetary health. I'm Chris Field, Director of the Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment, the co-organizer for today's event. The Woods Institute is Stanford's marquee investment in advancing understanding and developing practical solutions to our era's pressing environmental problems. Woods scholars team with other researchers, governments, companies, and NGOs to build bridges from research to action to address challenges in climate, food, water, oceans, biodiversity, and health. Today's session is a reflection of the strong sense of collaboration and shared mission between the Woods Institute and the Center for Innovation and Global Health. And it's also part of our celebration of Earth Week. Stanford has a cornucopia of Earth Week events, and the Woods website lists additional Stanford Earth Week events. For today's webinar, I'm excited that my colleagues will have the opportunity to share some of Stanford's exciting research at the intersection of planetary sustainability and human health. But I also want to share my own perspective on the centrality of planetary health to our broader mission as researchers, citizens, and as a university. The Stanford Woods Institute for the Environment focuses on solutions-oriented work on traditional environmental issues. And traditionally, these issues were framed in terms of securing habitat, conserving biological diversity, understanding risks from zoonotic disease, protecting or improving air and water quality, assuring access to abundant, healthy food, and supporting meaningful livelihoods for people around the world. This traditional framing is as relevant as ever, but it's not complete. Every one of the major areas the Institute supports is also directly related to sustaining the health and well-being of people and communities. We've always been about foundations for human health. Planetary health is a powerful entry point for making that connection explicit. Stanford's now involved in launching a new school focused on climate and sustainability. This is a bold and important effort, but it's also important to recognize that at its core, this is an effort about sustaining a planet healthy enough to support healthy people, vibrant communities, and robust economies. For me, there's no effort that's more important, and it's a thrill to be a part of today's event. Thank you for participating, and let me turn it over to my colleague, Professor Steve Luby.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Michelle. My name is Steve Luby. I'm a professor of medicine, and I'm also a member of the Woods Institute and the director of research for the Center for Innovation in Global Health. And I'll be the moderator today for this event. So for the participants, your video and audio will be automatically disabled, but I encourage you to please submit questions using the question and answer feature located in the menu bar, either at the bottom or top of your Zoom screen. And we'll try to get through as many of these questions as possible. I would like to next introduce our first Planetary Health Fellow here at Stanford, Britt Way. Britt?
Thank you so much, Steve. Hello, everyone. Happy Earth Day. If you're interested in the phenomenon of eco-anxiety, understanding what it is, how we know, and how we can address it, please join me immediately after this webinar in a separate Zoom meeting where we will be able to go into that for about 15 minutes together as a networking session. And the link will be shared in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Britt. I do want to add my greetings for a happy Earth Day and really have us take a moment to celebrate our remarkable home. And yet at the same time, reflect on the threat it is under and how we might be able to address some of these threats. So the notion of human and planetary health notes that we humans, as biological creatures, depend on a thriving biosphere for our survival. Human thriving requires an Earth that is thriving. And so human and planetary health pays particular attention to the human health cost of progressive environmental harms. And making these connections explicit can actually help decision makers justify attending to the environment. That is, we're not only preserving the environment, we're also attending to public health. So we're going to have just 3 outstanding panelists talk about some of the work that they're doing to address these concerns with human health and the health of the planet. Dr. Desiree LeBeau is a physician scientist, epidemiologist, and a professor in the Division of Pediatric Infectious Disease at the Stanford School of Medicine. She studies the epidemiology and ecology of domestic and international arboviruses and emerging infections with an interest in the vector, host, and environmental factors that affect transmission dynamics and spectrum of disease. Dr. Kari Nadeau is one of the nation's foremost experts in adult and pediatric allergy and asthma. She's the director of the Sean N. Parker Center for Allergy and Asthma Research at Stanford University and is an endowed professor under the Nadesi Family Foundation. Dr. Sana Sokolow, a disease ecologist and veterinarian at Stanford's Woods Institute for the Environment, is also the executive director of Stanford's Program for Disease Ecology, Health, and the Environment. Dr. Sokolow studies the environmental drivers of infectious disease and creative solutions to protect the health of people and the planet. She currently leads projects on human and planetary health in Senegal, Madagascar, Brazil, and Indonesia. So I'm now going to ask Desiree to begin her presentation.
Thanks so much, Steve. Happy Earth Day, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you today about plastic pollution, the environment, and health, both the challenges and the opportunities we have together. As many of you know, in many parts of Kenya and in many other countries of the world, solid waste, including plastics, is very poorly managed. Population growth and increased consumption haven't really been met with the same improvements in waste management. And this has led to a disproportionate taking care of all of these plastics. We know that the production and consumptions of plastics is also disproportionate. So in Nairobi, when the population has tripled, consumption of plastics is actually quadrupled. And we all know plastics don't biodegrade. More than 60% of solid waste remains uncollected. And in Kenya, where I work, only 5 to 17% of plastic is recycled. Plastic waste impacts our planet, the earth, the land, the air, the sea, and it impacts many, many sectors. Of course, today we're here on Earth Day talking about the environment, and plastic has an impact on biodiversity and marine ecosystem loss and water quality. Where I work in Kenya, plastic is often burned, leading to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution issues. The bad smells and unsightly trash, of course, are terrible for tourism, and that has its impact. And as a physician, I care a lot about how plastic impacts health. It's a toxic pollutant, it leads to food security issues and disease, which I'm going to focus on today. So environment, tourism, and health impacts all, of course, harm the local economy. What about plastics and health? Well, we know that plastic is toxic. Microplastics attract hydrophobic pollutants and get ingested by humans, impacting their health in harmful ways. Plastics also harm ocean ecosystems and threaten marine food chains, leading to food scarcity and security issues in populations. And plastic directly causes disease. Plastic waste creates breeding grounds for rodents and mosquitoes, and that's what our work focuses on. So our research has focused on the fact that plastic trash and other solid waste like tires collect water, creating ideal breeding grounds for Aedes aegypti mosquito, pictured here on this slide, which is a container breeder mosquito, and is responsible for transmitting dengue, yellow fever, chikungunya, and Zika viruses. We've been working on vector ecology and human epidemiology for these viruses and mosquitoes for many years in Kenya, and we've actually found the highest numbers of mosquito larvae at the yard shops. Yard shops are places where these plastics remain, sort of small trash dumps in our communities. And they're often very close to human dwellings where people live. And so what that leads to is a substantial amount of avoidable illness throughout our Kenyan coastal communities, leading to 50% of our community members being exposed to these harmful viruses. So if uncollected trash increases disease, that means that cleaning up trash should reduce disease. So there's an opportunity there. Reducing, recycling, and reusing solid waste is minimal right now in Kenya, but there's definitely a potential for scaling up these behaviors. And we know that trash collection and recycling provides opportunities for jobs and livelihoods and economic growth, which is very needed in our communities. And we have a model for this because metal and glass are recycled 100% in Kenya. So we have a way to go forward with the plastic trade. Our work has focused on trying to understand this plastic trade. And we've found many, many roadblocks in the way. So we've led focus group discussions and roundtable meetings and had in-depth interviews with all different stakeholders in this informal plastic economy in Kenya. And we've found that the infrastructure for storing trash is inefficient and inconvenient currently. We know that these yard shop operators and waste collectors face a lot of challenges in their work. And we know that the community members themselves really see little value in trash and actually stigmatize the handling of waste. So through our work, we've been trying to understand and describe what is the informal recycling trade in our communities. So we work on the south coast of Kenya in Ukunda and Likoni. And as I've mentioned, there's no formal recycling in Kenya at this point. There's just this informal recycling trade, which begins when waste collectors recover recyclables, metals, plastics, glass that have some value on the market. And then they sell them to yard shop operators, which then store them in their yard shops, creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Those yard shop operators then sell their plastic to traders or middlemen, which then sell the recyclables to maybe just a handful of large recycling plants that are in Nairobi. So we focus our work on these yard shop operators. And our work has really been about trying to decrease the challenges that they face in their work. So first and foremost, the business viability is not always stable and not that good because as you can imagine, the informal plastic market is quite volatile. They often get a lot of harassment from county and national government officials. We want to improve those relationships. And there's a lot of policy limitations. And so we're trying to work to improve the policies so that we can actually create a culture of plastic recycling in Kenya. Of course, there are health risks involved to the people in this trade. Working with trash is dirty business. And so we want to make PPE available and training accessible for them to decrease these health risks. And then finally, motivations. Most of the people in this trade are motivated because it's their livelihood. They're trying to feed their families and put their kids in school. And we want to change their mindsets a little bit and also have them include the environmental and the health concerns as motivations for their work. They're doing very important work. These are heroes of our communities. They're picking up trash, getting trash off the streets where it's no longer breeding mosquitoes and causing harm and disease for people. But we need to make sure they do it in a safe way where they cover their yard shops and they don't end up breeding mosquitoes at the yard shops themselves. So our approach through research has been this trash to treasure program where we're collecting trash for profit to reduce these mosquito breeding sites. We've created a business incubator program for these yard shop operators that improves their business skills, strengthens relationships with key stakeholders in the trade, and provides training on health, safety, and waste sorting practices. And what this has led to is a 10% increase in plastic waste volume traded, so less plastic on the streets causing disease. There's also been less fluctuation in prices, a streamlined transportation of their plastic products, and a strong peer network among the yard shop operators themselves. That's had great benefit. And luckily, this work has led to significant reductions in the harmful Aedes aegypti breeding in our communities. But research can't do everything. And so now we're also launching a new nonprofit called the Health and Environmental Research Institute Kenya, to translate the power of these scientific messages and scientific knowledge into community action that improves health by building education, awareness, and active community engagement on these environmental health issues, by empowering communities to change their cultural norms and actually destigmatize trash collection and safely clean up local environments. And we're hoping this will strengthen relationships among key stakeholders so we can figure out even more to do together in the future. We want to create recycling programs and jobs and increase economic development in our areas, and then decrease mosquito-borne and trash-related health risks. In the end, improving the trajectories of health for our people and our planet. But more action is needed. We need to explore policies and regulations that enable and support recycling. We've been working with Alpha at Stanford to do so and have made good gains in the policy sector, but there's more to be done there. We want to provide access to business loans to really create and spur more economic security and opportunity for these informal plastic trade workers. We want to support the creation of a market for plastics, for second use plastics, post-consumer plastics, to really incentivize plastic recycling in Kenya and improve waste collection infrastructure to streamline recycling operations. Through the nonprofit, we're hoping to create community awareness about the benefits of waste collection and recycling to promote this behavior and reduce stigma in our communities. And we want to continue to support the formation of groups to advocate for these informal recyclers that are doing great work for our communities. In the end, our work is actually coming to an end. The funding is coming to an end, but we're hoping that we can develop more funding opportunities for projects focused on community education and empowerment to really create a circular economy for plastics in Kenya and beyond. So I'd like to thank the BOVA Network who funded this Yard Shop Operator Social Entrepreneur Program. There are many people at Stanford University who have been involved in this work, and I thank them. The Technical University of Mombasa in Kenya is the lead Kenyan institution, and Francis Matuku is the lead Kenyan PI. And we have a team of professors there who also work with us in business and environmental health. We work with the Kenya Medical Research Institute, and I want to thank in particular our communities in Akunda and Lakoni, our yard shop operators, and our county government officials for working with us. Thank you for your attention, and again, happy Earth Day.
Thanks, Desiree. This is just such an exciting project that builds on your expertise and your connections, and it connects the environment to health. So thank you so much. I encourage the audience members to put questions in the Q&A function now so that we can accumulate those questions, and we'll bring our panel together to discuss these. Now, I'm going to ask Professor Carrie Nadeau to present her talk on climate and health, how wildfires are impacting kids in California. Kari.
Thank you so much, Steve, and happy Earth Day, everyone. And thanks to Dr. LeBeau for her wonderful talk. I feel very lucky to be part of this very special presentation for the Planetary Health Center at Stanford. And I am very happy to share data today about climate and health, and specifically focusing on wildfires and how they're impacting children in California. So importantly is that children, unfortunately, are the least responsible for climate change among our population around the globe, but unfortunately, they bear the greatest burden of its impact. The WHO estimates that nearly 90% of the burden of disease attributable to climate change is borne by children under the age of 5 in both developing and developed countries. And it will be difficult to overcome these challenges because nearly 20% of the world's children live in extreme poverty. And right now we know that pollution causes premature deaths about 7 million per year. And this number is thought to increase, and especially with wildfires increasing around our planet, we expect that to continue. Focusing on wildfires is really important for us in California as well as the West, but this is a global issue. So the topics that I'm going to be speaking today are applicable to many throughout the whole world. We've seen wildfires in the Arctic, wildfires in Brazil, man-made wildfires, as well as those accidentally man-made. But importantly is that the overall causes of wildfires around the world, this is information from California from 2017, although it's applicable to the globe, 90% of the wildfires are man-made. Unfortunately, vehicular, debris burning, miscellaneous electric power, lightning, as we saw last August, and many are preventable. And it's very important for all of us to know that there is no safe distance from a wildfire. And why is that? That's because smoke rises in the stratosphere. It goes horizontally across the earth, as we saw from some of the Australian wildfires circumnavigating the earth. Our wildfires last August also circumnavigated the earth. And so the smoke moves. And if it rains, it goes to ground and it goes into the water supply. So there really is no safe distance from the smoke created by wildfires. The smoke has about 400 different toxins in it. And unfortunately, we can try our best at mitigating that exposure through these HEPA filters that we can put in our home, which are helpful, as well as an N95 mask, which is effective to a degree, but not against some of the hazardous gases. So we really need to learn as a community how to mitigate and adapt to wildfires, but we have to do it with the knowledge that wearing these masks and using these filters isn't necessarily the perfect answer, but we need to apply answers from a multi-pronged approach. And importantly, when we look at wildfires, especially here, for example, in California, this was data that was provided by the National Academy of Sciences. Of course, each year we expect that there would be some wildfires, but with climate change and with the positive feedback loop from wildfires creating smoke, which then warms the planet more and traps greenhouse gases, we see an increase in the cumulative amount of acres burned. And with that, we need emergency preparedness plans. We need those plans to be made in different languages, Spanish as well as English. We need to understand to what degree we can provide clean rooms to those under-resourced communities that have nowhere to go to when they evacuate. These things came up very prominently in our last evacuation procedures in California in the wildfires that we suffered from in August. And importantly, you see here, for example, in Paradise fires, where the hospital was the place where people were supposed to go to be able to evacuate and be in a clean room where there was good filters. And unfortunately, the hospital was one of the first buildings to burn in Paradise. And so we need to be very careful about those types of extreme weather conditions and emergency preparedness plans that have an optional plan B plan in addition to a plan A plan, just in case the plan A plan catches on fire, like this example. The other major issue is that if we're going to have especially children outside, we need to make sure that the masks that they wear are appropriate. For example, this little girl was in the forest fire nearby her school in August, and you can see that she was wearing a surgical mask, not an N95 mask. And children, as well as people that are adults, should not be outside during a wildfire. There was a study that was published recently by our colleagues in San Diego County, and they looked at the exposure of wildfire smoke called particulate matter 2.5. So this is 2.5 microns in size that can actually get into the lower respiratory airways of children and cause havoc in their developing lungs. And when they looked at the overall emergency room visits, they saw that that exposure to the wildfire smoke was 10 times more harmful on children's respiratory health than from other sources. And that means PM 2.5 from diesel exhaust, which is very unfortunately toxic, but wildfire smoke is even more so. And so with that data, we now are approaching an understanding of other vulnerable populations that can also suffer from wildfire smoke. Everyone is at risk. However, those people with heart and lung disease are also more vulnerable to wildfires. Those that are underserved and under-resourced are more vulnerable to the effects of wildfires in terms of evacuation plans and being able to go to a safe area. Older adults are also at higher risk. There's increase in strokes and heart attacks after 4 days of a wildfire, for example. And again, children are at very high risk because of their decreased body weight, their increase in their developmental periods. And we talked about the lungs and asthma today, but importantly, their cognitive development, other issues are also very much targeted when we think about wildfires and how they could affect children, not just acutely, but also chronically after multiple exposures in one given area over years of wildfire exposure. And I want to end on some hope and promise. As Dr. Fields mentioned, it's really important to be able to have solutions facing research. And so with the Woods Institute, with groups around the world, we are using community-based participation approaches to think about solutions in communities. And you heard from Dr. LeBeau, you heard from Dr. Field. Importantly is that we have done research in the air polluted environment of the Fresno Central Valley. And they are also exposed to large amounts of wildfire in addition to air pollution. And so we worked with the local high school group there to develop a plan by which to educate the community, work with the California Air Resources Board, talk to the California legislative bodies. And because of that, we were able to share some data with you today about school buses and decreased emissions, but you can use the same type of approach when we think about filtration and work in wildfires. It's very important to all know that there's hope and promise of using renewable energy sources and reducing wildfire risk. And in general, by switching to renewable energy sources, for example, we believe that 7 million lives per year can be saved, as well as many jobs created. And here's an example of where our data from the Central Valley helped induce change at the national level as well as the local level. We were able to put filters into school buses to be able to decrease emissions in and around that area where school children were in the school bus area, which was idling, unfortunately. And now that has stopped. We've provided filters, luckily, to many of the school buses, thanks to California's new laws. And you're able to see here that asthma was reduced by about 30% in the children exposed to the diesel exhaust. This is one example of air pollution. Importantly is that we're now studying how filters and better use of masks can help mitigate health risks to children with wildfires. And so I want to end with a positive note in that we want to celebrate the earth. We want to celebrate its health, but the earth will only heal if we allow that to happen. If we all move together to change policy and to make sure that we follow recommendations in an equitable and just fashion so that every person can live with dignity and in good health. And that means protecting the planet, because our planetary health is inextricably linked to our health. So to transition to healthy, sustainable agricultural practices, to remove fossil fuel subsidies and invest in renewable energy, talk to the community, find out their needs first as we move forward, and lock elbows to make policy changes together and to benchmark those changes, increase access to healthy transport options, strengthen the public health system, talk to policymakers, invest in healthy recovery prevention and green areas and buildings leading to carbon sequestration and improve cognition and health. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kari. Thank you for all of your work on planetary health and addressing this very salient problem of these wildfires and the very big health consequences they have. Um, I think our whole community really appreciates your leadership in this area and this focus on solutions. So thank you. Looking forward to including you in the panel. There have been many questions. I encourage more people to add questions. And I would like to now turn to Dr. Sana Sokolow, who will speak on ecosystems and health, ecological levers for health and conservation. Sana.
Thanks, Steve, and welcome everyone. So these calm waters you're looking at here on the shores of the Senegal River harbor just underneath the surface tiny snails that carry the human parasite schistosomiasis. And unfortunately, in this area of northern Senegal, where we've been working for a little over a decade, it's some of the hottest transmission zones for schistosomiasis in the world. Kids who are collecting water here, bathing here, many of the villages have greater than 90% of the kids infected. And this wasn't always the case. Here you're looking at the Diama Dam in Senegal, built in 1986 near the mouth of the river. And in the upper right, you see that the case numbers for schistosomiasis before the dam were actually very low. So what happened? Here you're looking at a view of the basin, of the river basin from space. On the left before the dam, on the right after, and the dam is shown with a thick black line. And you can see from space this massive transformation of the landscape that happened as a result of the dam. In short, the dam brought more stable fresh water, more vegetation, and then an explosion of the snails that carry the parasite. And what you cannot see from space, though, is this guy. It's a migratory, large-bodied freshwater prawn. Does require brackish water for reproduction, and so used to migrate up and down this river system hundreds of miles every year to complete their life cycle, until the dam was built, of course, and then they're essentially extirpated from upstream of the dam. And this is very pertinent because these guys happen to be voracious predators of the snails that carry the parasite. So the ultimate question is what to do with this complex problem and with this information. Well, about 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago, we postulated, why not bring the prawns back? Couple that with treating the kids, the drug that clears them of the current worm infections. And we thought this would be a good approach, an effective approach, because it really targets both arms of this transmission cycle, from the human infections themselves, as well as the environmental source of this parasite in the snails in the water. And so we did just that. We partnered with folks from 10 countries, 4 continents, and built up this project called the Upstream Alliance, where we partnered to restore prawns in demonstration sites and study their effects on the parasite. So at a demonstration site where we both restored prawns and treated kids, we saw an 80% decline or reduction in snails and a 50% lower burden of the parasite in kids compared to a control site where drugs only were used. Okay, so what does this prawn story mean for us going forward? Well, we expect a little less than something like 10 billion people in not very long from now, maybe mid-century. And of course, that's going to require a massive upscaling of agricultural production, including dams, to support, rightfully, food security and nutrition for the growing population. But an open question remaining is what effect this massive transformation of the landscape that's coming is going to have on human infectious disease. And more importantly, what can we do in the environment? What kind of ecological measures can we devise to reduce that risk for people's health? All right, so I just told you about an intervention we've been studying that occurs in the ecosystem in order to affect better health for people accessing that environment. But I want to emphasize that the reverse is also true. There are ways to sort of intervene on the causal pathway that runs from human health to the environment by focusing on public health sector to make people healthier and also support them being better stewards of the ecosystems. So for that story, we're going to leave the Sahelian desert of Senegal, travel to some of the remotest and densest tropical forests in the world on the island of Borneo in Indonesia. So these forests are, as I said, some of the most carbon dense in the world and some of the most biodiverse forests in the world. Unfortunately, where these dense forests in the tropics are also some of the poorest communities in the world with the biggest healthcare gaps. So people living in these areas sometimes out of necessity have to log these valuable trees, even illegally in the national parks, in order to pay for the high out-of-pocket costs of healthcare. And who wouldn't? You know, they're really supporting their family's health, as we all would do. And so what to do with this complex problem? About 15 years ago, an innovative nonprofit called Health and Harmony, coupled with their Indonesian colleagues, and went to these communities living around one large national park in Indonesia, on Borneo, and built a health clinic, as well as coupled that with some conservation programming, and did innovative things like accepted barter payments for healthcare services in the form of, for example, these seedlings you're seeing here. And Stanford team was brought in to ask the important question, did deforestation rates change here? And you're seeing in the lower left, green is the park, red is deforestation that's occurring both inside and outside. And in the upper right, you see all the other national parks in Borneo that we compared it to. And the short answer is yes, there was a 70% decrease in deforestation rate in the park where this clinic was compared to all other national parks across Indonesia. And that was corroborated by household surveys that showed that the number of adult men reporting that they logged in the national park as a primary livelihood also declined 90% in this 10-year time period. So what does this mean? Well, clearly the local communities benefited from this intervention in the form of better health and access to health care, as well as healthier forests. But we wanted to look at what the global impacts of a small intervention like this in the corner, far corners of the globe might be having. And so I want to emphasize again the uniqueness of these really, really carbon dense forests. These are a scaled cartoon of the trees in this forest compared to, for example, in the lower left, a typical 15-year oil palm plantation. And so we went ahead and sort of did a back of the envelope calculation of both the amount of carbon conserved for in terms of a green climate solution from this one intervention, and coupled that with the value at the time on the European carbon market. And it turns out that the value of the forest conserved here outweighs by about 10 times the amount of money it cost to run this program for the 10 years. So we truly hope these kinds of ecological solutions can be scaled and sustained around the world. And we invite you to check out this program for disease ecology, health, and the environment, which I helped co-found in 2015 to hear about these stories and many other projects that we're working on in this space. And thanks for your enthusiasm in advance, and happy to answer questions.
So I'm going to ask all of the presenters to come back, and I'm going to start with an initial question to Desiree. Desiree, one audience members want to know to what extent the plastics problem is a technological problem for developing a market solution, and to what extent you see this venture to become self-sustainable and economically viable.
I had just typed some answers in there. I think that we have a lot of technological advances and we're finding more and more to deal with the plastic problem. One advance that maybe I should bring up is something that we're working on right now and trying to get funding for. So it was discovered in a bacterial species was discovered in a trash dump in Japan that actually naturally biodegrades plastic and eats plastic, and then is able to produce this really methane-rich biogas as a side product of chewing away this plastic. And why this is important is because some plastic has more value than others and is useful, and other plastics sit around for longer and cause more problems. And the plastic that really right now has very, very little value on the plastic market is PET plastic, or the plastic that we get from plastic water bottles. Of course, this is an environmental justice issue because we wouldn't have plastic like this in plastic water bottles if everyone in the world had safe and reliable access to clean water. But where we are now, we have to deal with this PET plastic. And so there are some technological advances like this one that need to be sort of scaled up. There are others. I know Craig Criddle at Stanford is working on similar work to try to chew apart this plastic. And I think that, if we had a better market for plastic in the end, of course, that would lead to more technological advances, right, to get it through the pipeline. And so I think they all feed off of each other. As far as self-sustainability goes, we dream of that. I don't think we're at the place now where we're sustainable, where clearly the yard shop operators are in this business because they have sustainable business practice and it's enough for them to live, but they're not living, particularly well. And so we really want to create all sorts of different livelihoods in this trade. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think in a little bit of time and with more of the stakeholders coming together and discussing challenges and figuring out, how to meet these challenges together, I think we will find some very sustainable ways to deal with this plastic problem. This is not a problem that's going away. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And it's an entire stream that we need to deal with, both the production and the use, plastic alternatives, and then the end goal with the users and the recyclers.
Thanks, Desiree. I want to open the next question to the whole panel. And one questioner asks, for each presenter, if you had the opportunity to meet with President Biden, what would you ask for? And if it's funding, what specific application? So I'd like to first hear from Kari, but we'll hear from all of the presenters. So Kari, you have your 10 minutes with Joe Biden. What would you ask him for?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the key aspect is for him, we already assume that he's knowledgeable about a lot of these things. So it wouldn't be about education necessarily. It would be about ensuring that he's going to focus on regulations that matter and that are sustained in terms of divesting in fossil fuels and investing in renewable energy sources and making sure that sticks. And then the other major aspect that I would want him to focus on is those that are the most vulnerable. We have got to make sure that environmental justice is connected with racial justice, that we have had obviously many issues come up this past year with Black Lives Matter, and all of this is connected to the health of the planet. So when we treat our most underserved better, we treat the planet better. Those things are interlinked. And so that would be my second biggest topic, to make sure that environmental justice is part of the priorities that he seeks, to have these regulations applied to all communities and help them rise and help the planet improve and heal.
Well, I'm going to ask our Woods in Washington people to see if they can get you your 10 minutes. Sana, how would you use your time?
Yeah, well, I'm an infectious disease person. And so I would focus on the moment we have now to think about how we have dealt with the infectious disease issue, especially our current pandemic, really with reactive policies and practices. And we really need to think a lot more. And I think we're very much more aware now of the upstream sources, the environmental sources of many of these threats, and how just like the examples I was showing you, I think we can devise creative solutions. And we need to think about those creative solutions in the environment to prevent way further upstream the potential for infectious diseases, and even outside of our borders. The one other thing I would want to ask is that we think about creative ways to open up carbon markets to smaller actors, to these community groups, to the groups like, and even outside our borders also, because really we're all on one Earth, there's no planet B. So.
Thanks, Sana. Desiree, you might have your own ideas here too, but I also, if you wonder if you're interested in connecting to some of the questions in the Q&A about, but wait a minute, it's fossil fuel companies that are making all this plastic to begin with. We have all of this big upstream problem. Should it really all fall down to the people in Kenya? And I don't know if that's what you wanted to talk to Joe about, but it seems to me some of the big picture issues might be part of what you would want to engage. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would echo a lot of what Kari and Sana have said. I mean, it's so important for us to recognize and be accountable as a nation for the amount fossil fuel that we use, for all of the harsh fact that the US is a huge contributor in this, and to first and foremost be accountable, and then to recognize our power as a nation to become a global leader in reversing these impacts of climate change. I think it has a lot to do with what Kari said. Policies need to change, right? To support individuals all along the change. We're talking about policies, as you bring up, Steve, about the producers, the business, the greed, right? But then also, policies that promote, creative solutions and innovative thinking in ways that we can tackle these challenges. I'm a physician and a researcher, so of course I would talk to him about promoting research funding to support work that describes these next challenges, figures out these technological advances of how we're gonna meet this challenge together, right? And figuring out how to work with different communities across all the different sectors to come up with these creative solutions. I think what Kari mentioned about vulnerable solutions is really very important. I think all of the challenges on Earth, including our huge climate change crisis, which is our most important challenge that we're facing in our lifetime, all comes down to poverty in the end, because a lot of climate change is due to people not being able to have their basic needs met and then making bad decisions for the earth because they need to get their basic needs met. So if we can, again, strike up these environmental justice issues, bring them to the forefront, I think it will fix a lot of our problems. And remembering that we are global leaders. COVID taught us, as if we didn't know it before, we are all highly, highly connected on this tiny little blue marble that we're all sitting on together. And these, it's all a facade, this difference and other people over there. We're all super connected, and we need to really treat the way we approach our process and figuring out these problems in a very global and connected way, recognizing that what I do today impacts people all over the world and vice versa.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to ask Woods in Washington to get 30 minutes so we can get all three of you to talk with Joe. Another issue that strikes me, listening to this exciting work that you're doing, is how much each of you are connected to communities. How much this is not just a study of academic problems, but that each of you are actually working with communities, working to understand from their perspective. And so one of the questions that arises in the audience is, how do you really ensure community engagement as you do this? And how do we ensure that women are also, their concerns are also centered in this kind of work? So again, I would ask the three of you to reflect on this. And just to give a little bit of variety, maybe we'll ask Sana to start this time.
Oops. Okay, great. Yeah, that's a tough question and very interesting. I guess the short answer for me is that this is all place-based work, which means that there's every ecology and every community is different. And so we can't pretend to be the experts sitting at Stanford knowing everything. I think Kari also mentioned, and Desiree also did too, that the community needs are really the ones that are driving some of the environmental destruction. We can't vilify communities who, as I was saying in my talk, are simply trying to ends meet and pay for security, food security, for health security for their families. And so we need to find a way to hear from them and kind of de-emphasize our own superiority, our own intellectual superiority in any way, because we don't know the complexity of those particular ecosystems, including people. So that's the first step. We're also promoting a connection between the Environmental Justice Working Group and our planetary health work here at Stanford. And we're, just as a little plug, we're having a workshop for Stanford researchers about this very issue for 3 Wednesdays in May. So we'll send more information about that, about continuing this particular conversation.
Kari?
Yeah, I think community engagement is key and critical to climate change. There are many communities that, for different reasons, haven't really understood climate change or haven't been directly affected by it. And so we need to educate those communities in a way that welcomes their participation in shared decision-making processes, as well as welcomes their input so that we can be curious. Like Sana said, let's not necessarily come to the equation with all of our answers, because we don't have answers. We need to come to the equation with communities in humility and with curiosity. And I find that communities can not only teach us and inspire us, but they can also serve with this fervent compassion that helps us engage in our research, so that I feel like it's a positive feedback loop. We're engaging them and asking them, what are your needs? What kind of topics would you like us to do research on? For example, let's do research on whether or not a filter in someone's house is actually helpful in decreasing smoke exposure inside. If I shut my doors, then does it actually help me breathe better and help my children and protect them? So that's one study that's never really been done well. So those are the types of things that the communities will ask us to do. And then we engage the communities to say, okay, let's benchmark this. How can we make sure that this is sustained? And I feel like that connection with the community is sort of a microcosm of what we should be doing internationally. That type of approach as scientists and researchers can help us in any type of conversation with groups, so that we approach it with humility and with compassion, and with making sure that we understand that we're going to learn a lot from this community as to how to approach our science better and how to help people better throughout the globe.
Thank you. Desiree.
Yeah, I so agree with everything Sana and Kari have said. So, I'm a field epidemiologist. I've been working in Kenya for almost 2 decades now, beside all of my incredible Kenyan scientists and team members. And I think for me, the engagement with the community is pretty much everything we do. It's where we get our ideas. It's where we understand, what we should be focusing on, what the needs are. I think that, I think what we need to do is just listen. I think we need to get out into communities and just be quiet and listen, because it's been my experience working in Kenya that many people have already come up with creative solutions for the problems that they themselves and their communities are facing. Very innovative, incredible solutions. And so I think that if we just sit down, engage, really partner, bring people to the table and create those bridges between, and I know that this, I'm working in communities in Kenya, and we're talking about the world scope here, but I really think it really does come down to listening and having all of those important stakeholders at the table, so that you can get all those different voices, so that you can, you can share what you know and influence communities and their actions in that way. And then you can learn from what the true issues are and what the potential right under your nose solutions might be that are just there for the finding.
Well, thanks, Desiree. We're actually near the end of time, but I want to give each of our panelists 45 seconds to summarize what they see as the key messages coming out of this on Earth Day for the audience. So I'm going to pass the baton again to Kari to start us off.
Well, this is a pretty exciting time to be celebrating Earth Day, and with all of you here that were present, and that I would ask each of you to think about something today that you can take forward from what you've heard today and act on it, and make sure that we can continue this action orientation towards solving some of these critical climate change issues. All of this knowledge should not stay here today. We need to have it move forward and have a ripple effect and be impacted in a way that helps us change this planet towards better health for its peoples and better health for the planet.
Thanks, Kari. Sana.
Yeah, I always want to end on a note of hope. And I just, the research that I've presented and the work we're doing and human and planetary health and disease ecology at Stanford is demonstrating that we're kind of early days, but we can turn this knowledge about the drivers of disease, which we've learned a lot about, especially the environmental drivers, into these ecological levers or ecological solutions. I encourage everyone to check out what we're doing and get involved, because there's more and more happening. There's many Keystone projects around the world, and it's a interdisciplinary work by nature. So we need more involvement from all of you to make it happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Desiree.
I would say that whatever you're doing out there, whatever work you do or extra time Maybe you spend time watching TV or I don't know, whatever your pastimes are. Maybe you have a little extra time in your life. Maybe you don't have any extra time. Either way, this is it. This is the crisis of our lifetime. Somehow as humans, we like to go back to normalcy. We like things easy and convenient for us. We like to sort of ignore things that are hard, but humans can do hard things. We're on this one little planet together, and the time is now to drop whatever you were doing before and join us in order to solve this climate crisis. And when I say now, I mean now. I love this quote. There's a quote that says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. The same is for the climate crisis. So if you haven't been working on this work with us, please join us now and help us. There's so much to do, so much to get involved with, and so much we can really accomplish together if we just work together and get kicking. So join us.
Well, thanks very much, Desiree. Thanks, Sana. Thanks, Kari, for your work and for your presentation. So what we heard today was from three leading scientists at Stanford talking about the specific work they're doing that connects human health to planetary health. So on this Earth Day, we saw how Stanford was using cutting-edge interdisciplinary approaches to take on this great challenge of our time, and the power that a planetary health framing has to both engage with communities and guide research. I want to again also thank the audience for your participation, for coming to learn more about Earth Day, and for the many good questions you've asked. And I apologize that we ran short of time and I wasn't able to address all of these to the panel. I also want to encourage you to check the chat, and you can link to this, this event coming up, looking at some of the eco-anxiety dimensions and how this can both increase our understanding and motivate action. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a wonderful Earth Day.